Hello, this is going to be my Kerbal Space Program tutorial, and so in this series I'm going to explain to you how to play Kerbal Space Program, why it's so fun, and hopefully after watching the series you'll have a little bit more knowledge on how to play and can get started right away. So we're going to start a new game, and I'm going to start new, and well, for this tutorial we're going to be playing Career Mode, but the difference between the modes is basically Career Mode you have to manage science and money, Science Mode you just have to manage science, not money, and Sandbox Mode you don't have to manage science or money. So I'm going to make our difficulty settings easy, and then name my save tutorial. And then you can choose your flag, so I don't know. Default flag is pretty good. And then I'm going to start my game. So now it's going to load up into the world, and well, once we get into the world, we're going to be greeted with the Kerbal Space Center. So Gene Kerman over here says, give you some instructions, but we don't really need to see that. So the Kerbal Space Center is basically your hub of buildings, and in Kerbal Space Program, your job is to manage a alien race called Kerbals and build them a dominant or basically manage their space program. So here is your space complex that you're started with. You have your runway over here, the launch pad. This is your vehicle assembly building, which is where you'll be building your rockets. This is the spaceplane hangar, which is where you build like space planes. This is the mission control. You basically go here to accept contracts, which basically tell you what planets to go on, but you don't really have to. You can go your own way if you want to. This is the tracking station where you basically find where your ships are. This is research and development. This is where you unlock new parts. And then this is the astronaut complex where you basically hire more Kerbals. So now each of these buildings can be upgraded. So you upgrade it to unlock more features. And then, okay, so up here I have my money, so I have $250,000, and my science, which I currently have 0. So the first thing we're going to do in this tutorial is we're going to go to mission control. And you can see here, these are my contracts available. Now, they're met with star difficulties, and you can, the base level mission control center can have a maximum of 2 contracts. So I'm going to gather scientific data from Kerbin. I will accept that contract, and launch our first vessel. I will accept that contract too. So now I have reached my maximum contracts, so I'm going to leave the mission control. And now I'm going to go into the vehicle assembly building. So once I load into the vehicle assembly building, we have Werner von Kerman is going to say, hello, hello, hello. Okay, great, we understand. So now this is the vehicle assembly building. So you can, if you hold down shift, you can, well, I can't do any controls since I don't have a part, but so I'm going to place my first part. So I want my Mark 1 command pod to be the first part. Okay, so now that there's a part, I can rotate around by holding the right mouse button. I can hold shift and zoom in or out. And then I can, if I zoom without holding any shift, I go up and down. Okay, so let's zoom into a comfortable place. And up here I'm going to name I can name my craft, so I'm going to name it craft 1. And then, as you can see, down here it'll tell me this is how much money I have, and this is how much money my rocket costs. But in my experience, you don't really need to pay attention to that because the rockets are pretty cheap, unless you're going for something really expensive, and you don't have a lot of money. Anyway, so over here we have all of our sections of parts. And these will populate as we unlock science and get more like parts. So pods, well right now there's only 1 pod. Under fuel tanks I don't have any fuel tanks, but under engines I have the Flea solid rocket booster, and this is what I start with. So I'm going to put the Flea solid rocket booster underneath my command pod, and what's special about solid rocket boosters is that they are not, you turn it on, but you can't turn it off until it runs out of fuel, and you can't like throttle it up or down. So you can't say, oh, I want it to run at 75% throttle. It's either 0 or 100. But it's the only engine we have to start with, so it'll suffice. And then these are all mostly empty. And then utility, we have parachutes. So I'm going to stack a parachute on top so I can land safely. And then, well, our whole job is to get science, so we can unlock more parts. That's what we want to do in the early game. So I'm going to go over to the science tab here. And right now my only science experiment is the mystery goo containment unit. Okay, so I'm going to take the mystery goo. But, so in Kerbal Space Program, you have what's called biomes. And each planet, moon, and parts of space are separated into biomes. And in a biome, a science experiment can only be taken once. And if you try to take it a second time, it will yield no science. Or sometimes it'll yield little science. So in our flight, we're going to be launching from 3 biomes. We're going to have the launch pad, we're going to have lower atmosphere, and then we're going to have the water where we land. So, and since the mystery goo is special and can only be used once per flight, I'm going to put 3 of them on. But in order to keep the mass evenly distributed, I'm going to put 3 of them on in symmetry. So if I click this little symmetry button down here twice for 3 times symmetry, and then put down my science goo, mystery goo thingy, and click, then now I have 3 all evenly distributed. And then if I say wanted to move one, I can it'll move all 3. So that's going to be our basic craft for today. But before we launch, we're going to have to check our staging. So now, the way we check our staging is we go down here into the bottom right, and you can see right now I only have 1 stage, and it's going to it's going to release my parachute and light the engine at the same time. We don't want to do that. We want to launch our engine first and then release our parachute. Okay, so I have my staging down here. So I want my engine to light first, and then once my engine depletes, I'm going to light my parachute. So our staging is good, and our craft is costs enough. And then the last thing we need to do is determine who is going to be sitting in this command chair, this crew capsule. So if I go over to crew here, I can see I have 4 Kerbals to start with. I have Jebediah Kerman, Bill Kerman, Bob Kerman, and Valentina Kerman. Now, in Kerbal Space Program, there are 3 types of Kerbals. You have pilots, scientists, and engineers. So I start with 2 pilots, Jebediah and Valentina, 1 scientist, Bob, and 1 engineer, Bill. Now, each type of Kerbal has a different ability or bonus that they give you. Pilots help you stabilize your ship. Scientists allow you to reset individual experiments like the mystery goo. And engineers, well, they help you with mining later in the game. So for this tutorial, for this launch, we're going to have a pilot and it's recommended they have a pilot because they can keep your ship oriented properly, or at least help you, right? Effects stability assist. So we're going to have a Jebediah in our command chair, and then so I think we're ready to launch. So if we press the save button up here and then launch, it'll automatically bring us out to the launch pad. So once it loads, you can see here that we're on our mission. So down in the bottom right we have our Kerbal, and it's basically just a picture of him, and it tells us his name. And from there we can do options such as EVA, which means like get in your spacesuit and walk outside. In the center down here we have our nav ball, which basically tells us our heading relative to our current position. So right now we're pointing straight up, which basically means like towards the sky. But if we turned, then we'd be pointing a different way. Over here we have our stages, and then up here we have our altitude. So this basically tells us how high above the ground are we. And I can transition it from sea level to terrain, and that'll just basically take into account the current terrain I'm at. And then down here we also have our velocity, which is useful for knowing how much speed you're going. So since the launch pad is a biome, I'm going to want to take some science. So the first science, so I'm going to observe the first mystery goo, and it's going to tell us that we've gotten some science. So I'm going to press keep. Okay. So then I'm going to right-click on my command pod and press crew report. Now this is another form of science, and it'll help you in the early game because it gives you more science. So I took a crew report and I have gained 3 science. So I'm going to press keep. And then if I go to my Kerbal Jebediah here and press EVA, it's going to bring him out in a spacesuit. And then I can control them. I can make them go up with W, down with S, etc. I can make them fly around in a jetpack, but Kerbin, the planet we started on, has too much gravity to make for the jetpack to work. So anyway, so if I right-click on Jebediah, I can press EVA report, which will give me another science, another 4.8 science. And so if I keep that, and then I can right-click on the capsule and press Take Data. And this basically resets the crew report so we can take another crew report at an additional biome. Okay, so now if I press B to board, I board my capsule, or Jebediah boards the capsule again, and we can see, and now we have our science. It is stored in the capsule, but the crew report, we can take a new crew report. But I don't want to do that yet. So now, what I'm going to do is I want to get off the ground. So the first thing I'm going to do is press T, or this little SAS button here, which will activate SAS, which stands for Stability Assist System, or something like that. And it's really useful because it'll have Jebediah over here help us keep us oriented to our ship, or it won't it'll try to not have us flip out of control. So now, if I press the space bar, I'm going to activate the first stage, which in this case would light my engine. And then if I press the space bar again, it'll bring out the parachute. But I'm only going to want to press the space bar once. Okay, so here goes. So I press the space bar, and now I'm throttling away. And if I press the D button, I can turn. D is to the right, A is to the left, S is up, and D is down. So now you see how I'm on my on the nav ball, I'm turning, right? Because that's representing my heading. Now you might see this yellow circle, and that means prograde. That means like what direction am I moving, and then this little V thing will tell you what direction you're facing. So I could be facing a completely opposite direction than I'm heading, but you'll generally want to go in the direction you're heading for aerodynamic properties. Okay, so now I'm climbing. I'm at 10,000 feet, 10,500, 10,600, almost 10,650, and so forth. So, and now I'm climbing down because I've reached. It's like a ball. If you throw a ball up in the air, it's going to go up, and then eventually it's going to come back down, and it's going to go down faster. As you can see, my speed is increasing. So now I'm going to deploy my parachute. So I press spacebar, and my parachute is deployed. But the parachute doesn't fully open until you get to a certain height, and that's fine. It'll open in time. But while we're here, we can do some more science since the lower atmosphere is a new biome. So if I right-click on the next mystery goo and observe it, I get some science. So I'm going to keep that. I'm going to take a crew report. And I'm going to keep that. And then I would get on an EVA, but if I press EVA, it says cannot disembark while off of Kerbin's surface. Astronaut complex upgrade required. So that means I must upgrade the astronaut complex before I must upgrade the astronaut complex building before I can go on a out of Kerbin EVA. So now we're approaching the ground. We're only about 600 meters away, and the parachute is deploying. So now we're slowing down to about 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 7 or 6 meters per second, and that's pretty good. You would generally want to hit the ground around less than 10 meters per second. So now you might think, oh man, this is slow. Do I have to wait? No, you don't, because if you press the period key, you can enter time warp, and you can go up to ×4, and then pressing comma will get out of time warp. So if I go time warp ×4, and we touch down on the ground gently. Okay, so now that we're on a different biome, I can take the last mystery goo. So I can observe mystery goo, and I get some more science. I'm going to keep that, and then I can go on an EVA since I'm on Kerbin's surface. So now I'm going to take the data from the command pod, give me a EVA report, board, and now the crew report has been reset, so I can take another crew report from Kerbin's shores, keep, and now I am done with the mission. I want to go back to the Kerbal Space Center and claim all the science that I've earned. So what I do is I come up to this little altitude bar, and if I hover my mouse over, you have two options. You can recover your vessel, and you can go to the Space Center. If you recover your vessel, the craft will be removed from the world, which is what we want, because then we can claim our science. But if we go to Space Center, our craft will still be here, and in theory we could send a rover out and interact with it, or refuel it maybe, stuff like that. So I'm going to recover the vessel, and it's going to load. And once it finishes loading, it's gonna pop us back into the Kerbal Space Center, but it's gonna give us this summary. It's gonna say, here's all the science you earned from that mission. So we earned 58.6 science, but we have a total of 84 science now, and that's because some of our contracts that we did earlier gave us some science. So if I press next, it's gonna tell us what parts, how much money we've given, and then it's gonna say Jebediah, who was on our mission, gained 1 experience. Which is good. Good for him. He's going to level up and give us more advanced piloting skills. Okay, so now I'm here. So I have my 84 science. I want to go spend some of my science. So I'm going to go into research and development, and you can see we have this giant tech tree here. Now, some of this, so we're going to start over in the basic tech items, and the 2 items we can unlock first are basic rocketry, which gives us some more engines and fuel, or Engineering 101, which gives us some more science and a decoupling unit. So if you press on a category and press research, it'll unlock all the parts for you and deduct the appropriate amount of science. So in this case, 5 science. So I'm going to research basic rocketry, and I'm also going to go ahead and research Engineering 101. So now it's opened up 3 more options. Survivability, which gives me heat shields, more science, and some more parachutes. Stability, which gives me some aerodynamic stuff. And general rocketry, which is going to give me some more fuel and engines. So you're going to want to figure out what our next mission is going to be. But I think for sake of this tutorial, I'm going to go to general rocketry and research that. Now I still have 54 science, so I can go for advanced rocketry, which I might do, or I can go general construction, which I might also do, but general construction doesn't really offer anything that I want at the moment. So I don't want to go for general construction at the moment. Stability, that seems pretty useful, and I do have enough science for it, but I only have enough, and survivability is also pretty useful. So if we want our next flight to be, our next flight is going to be to just up into space, but not into orbit, and then back down. So we're going to go on a suborbital flight. So for that, we're going to unlock the advanced rocketry section. So if I research that, I have 9 science left, but I can see I cannot afford anything else. So now that I've done my research, I'm going to leave the facility, and I'm going to go into mission control. And now it's giving me a bunch more contracts. And the next contracts we're going to want are, most of these contracts are like, conduct a focused observational study of Kerbal. Take a crew report in flight above 18,000 meters near Staley's greatness. Yeah, I have no idea where that is. I don't really want to do that. That's just going to be complicated. But there's this one over here, escape the atmosphere. Breach the atmosphere by flying a vessel an altitude of 70 meters to achieve this goal. That sounds more doable. So I'm going to accept that contract, and then I'm also going to accept orbit Kerbal, even though we're not going to do it on our next flight. So now that I've accepted my contracts, I'm going to go over to the vehicle assembly building, and I'm going to build a new craft. So it loads our previous craft, but if I press the new button up here, it's going to make a new craft. I'm going to name this craft Craft 2. So now I'm going to start with my command pod, and then I'm going to add myself a parachute, and then I'm going to add some fuel. So now these fuel tanks hold fuel, but what's special about a fuel tank is you can throttle your fuel engines, and you can also stop engines that run on fuel. So let's see. So that's a lot of fuel, and then I'm going to put an engine. So now I have several engine choices. I can go with a solid rocket booster, but since I already have fuel, I don't want to do that. So I can either go with a swivel engine, a Terrier engine, or a Reliant engine. Now a Terrier engine is optimized to be used in vacuum, which is space, not at sea level in air. So I'm not going to want to use the Terrier engine, but I can either use the Reliant engine or the swivel engine. Now the Reliant engine offers more thrust, but the swivel engine has the ability to turn, which can help me steer, which is what, but on this flight I'm not necessarily going to need to steer, so I'm going to go with the Reliant engine. So I put it down at the bottom, and it now adds it to the staging. But we're going to want to light the engine before the parachute, so make sure to check your staging. And you can see it says 2890 meters per second. So that basically means so a meters per second is a measure of delta V, which basically means if I'm going at this speed, in this case 0, and then light my engine, by the time I run out of fuel, how much faster will I be going? In this case, I will be going 2890 meters per second faster. But if I started at, say, 1000 meters per second and then lit this engine, then I would be going, by the time it runs out of fuel, I'd be going 38,000 or 3,890 meters per second. So that's what delta V is, and there's a thing called a delta V chart, which can basically tell you how fast you need to be going in order to get to a certain planet or moon, which is really helpful for planning missions. So this is going to be our ship. It's going to have plenty of delta V. We're going to have no problem on that regard, but I'm going to need some science. So we have our mystery goo, and we're going to take mystery goo in the biomes upper atmosphere, in space near Kerbal, and in space high above Kerbal. Although we might not get to the last one. So if I add 3 of them, right, I'm going to add it on the command pod this time. And I'm going to make sure I don't, yeah, I'm going to add it to the command pod. Alright, there we go. We have our 3 science materials. And then the 2 hot thermometer, well, I'm going to add several of these. I'm going to go to ×2 symmetry now. And I'm going to add, we got 4 total. 2 on that side and 2 on that side. So that's going to be our science. And then one part I forgot about is if we go under coupling, we're going to have a decoupler here. So once this tank runs out of fuel, we're going to want to be able to get rid of it. So in order to drop this tank of fuel, we're going to have to add a decoupler. So I'm going to add a decoupler here and then put this. So now it adds another event on the staging. So I want to light the engine before decoupling and then parachute. So, oh, by the way, you press the little plus and minus buttons to get rid of or add stages. So now one other problem is we're going to need a heat shield to come back into the atmosphere. So if I go into thermal over here, I don't have any heat shields. But for this mission, a heat shield isn't really required. But if we were going to orbit, a heat shield would be required your ship would blow up if you didn't have a heat shield coming down or were very had a weird profile. Anyway, so this is going to be our ship, and we're going to go to crew, and I still want Jebediah on the command seat, so that's good. Everything looks good, so I'm going to save and launch. So now once it loads, we're in the same place as before. So now if I press T to activate SAS, so now I have, well, the last mission we did, we didn't really care about the throttle, but now we're going to care about the throttle. So if I press Shift, the throttle goes up. If I press Control, throttle goes down. Shift, Control. But if I want more general movements, if I press Z, throttle goes all the way up to 100%, and if I press X, throttle goes all the way to 0. So I'm going to go to Z, and then control a little to bring the throttle down a little bit more. And you can always adjust the throttle mid-flight. So now I'm going to take one of our science. I'm going to log the temperature. 4.8 science. Nice. Okay. So notice if I were to observe a mystery goo, it's going to say little science because I've already observed from the launch pad. So I'm just going to reset the experiment. Okay, so we have our throttle, our SAS, so now, and our staging is good. So if I press spacebar, it's going to light the engine. And so I'm going a little fast, so I'm going to press Control to slow down the throttle. So now I'm just going to go up. Actually, that's a little too slow, so maybe some Shift to go faster. So far so good. And so yeah, so if I press Shift some more to go to full throttle, we're going to be increasing in speed. So if you see here, we're going 230, 240, 250, 260. We're going really fast in terms of our meters per second. And now we're starting to get some aerodynamic effects. But our ship is pretty aerodynamic. Well, not really. Because you see we're falling out of we're like spinning around. So Jebediah isn't really helping us in this situation. So if I press the escape key, it pauses, and I'm going to press revert flight, and I can either revert to launch or vehicle assembly. In this case, the problem is a vehicle problem, so I want to go to a vehicle assembly. If it was a flight-related issue, then I would go to launch. So I'm going to go to vehicle assembly, and then I'm going to add, if I go into aerodynamics, I have basic fins. And I'm going to add 4 basic fins on the bottom of the ship. And this is going to help us stabilize while we're in the air. So now I'm going to press save and launch. And once we load, we can try our flight again. So once again, I'm going to press T for SAS, Z for full throttle, and then maybe lower it down a little. And then space to activate the engine, and we're off. Oh, I forgot to take the science, but that's okay. So now we're going straight up into the air. And for this mission, we're just going to want to go straight up and then straight back down. We're not going to want to deal with getting into orbit. So, well, while we're in the atmosphere, I'm going to take one of my science temperatures. So I'm getting from, oh, well, I don't want to do it that low. Maybe 5,000 is where you have to be. If I take the temperature now, okay, sure. So I get 11 science from doing it right here. So now you can see we're getting some aerodynamic effects, and that's basically because we're going pretty fast. So I'm going to lower down the throttle a little bit. Now, if you go to, so we seem to be pretty steady here. Our fins are helping us. So if I press M on the keyboard, it brings me up into map view. And now I can see there's the sun, here's Kerbin, and here is our flight. So at the moment, we started here, our craft is currently here, and this is our current path. So now you can see our apoapsis, which is going to be our highest point, is rising, which we want it to be because we're going north, or we're like shooting up. So if we stop throttle now, so if I press X, we're gonna reach a highest point of 203,000 meters before slowing down. But I want to go a little higher than that, so I'm gonna press Z again to keep throttle, and it's gonna raise. So now if I press M, I'm almost out of fuel. So I'm just gonna wait until I get out of fuel. And okay, so I ran out of fuel. So now I'm going to get rid of the initial booster stage. So now I've gotten rid of that. I'm going to, I have my craft. And right now we're in space because we're at 110,000 meters and space starts at 70,000 meters. So I'm going to take a mystery goo, which is going to be in space near Kerbin, 20 science, nice. I'm going to take a science, or I'm going to take a temperature, nice. And then I'm going to take a, well, I'm not going to take a crew report because I'm going to wait until we get to in space high above Kerbin to take a crew report. So if I go back to the map view, we can see here's Kerbin, and if I keep zooming out, well, I get to the Mun, which is basically the moon. And it has its orbit plotted. And then if I zoom out more, I get to Minmus, which is another one of Kerbin's moons. And then if I keep zooming out, I get to the whole solar system, which we have Kerbal, the sun, Moho, Eve, Kerbin, Duna, Drez, Jewel, and Elu. So if I zoom back in, I can see our current orbit. Or we're not really in orbit, but we're in a suborbital trajectory. If we were in an orbit, we would have a circle around Kerbin. So I can time warp and then keep track of my position. So I press the period key to go increase time warp, and then comma to decrease time warp. So I think that's going to be enough time warp for me. So if I press the M key to escape map view, I'm now at an altitude of 453,000 meters. Oh, you can see the Mun in the background. So I'm going to take some more science. So I have mystery goo while in space high over Kerbin. So I'm going to keep that experiment. I'm going to do some more science, some temperature, and a crew report. Now if I try to get Jebediah to go in his EVA suit, it's going to say I need to upgrade the astronaut complex, so I'm not going to do that yet. And, well, I think that's it for my science up, and I think that's it for my science, although... Oh, I forgot to do one of the science experiments. That's okay, we're going to be falling down pretty soon. So if I time warp, you can see I'm going up, and then you can also see how Kerbal rotates. So I'm falling down, falling down, falling down. I'm going to slow down time. And I'm about to hit the atmosphere. Okay, I just hit the atmosphere. So when you hit the atmosphere, it's going to bring you up to times warp times 1 for safety. And now I'm going to take this science experiment while I can. And as you can see, we're getting some aerodynamic effects. So now this is what happens when you enter the atmosphere. You're going to have some heating. Now you can see these are my my parts, and they're overheating. But if I press Q to rotate, they won't overheat as fast. So which sometimes gets them not as fast. Okay, so now we've gotten rid of our aerodynamic effects. So I'm going to press. We're going to want to deploy our parachute once this is white, and in this case it's already white. So I'm going to press space to deploy the parachute, and it's going to slow us down initially, but it's not going to open up fully until we get closer to the ground. So now while I wait, I can press the period key to increase time, and then okay, our parachute is fully opened. So now we're going to go in. We're going to just wait until we hit the ground. Let's go. Keep going. Alright, and you can see our shadow. You can see our shadow here, and we're going to meet, and boom, we hit the ground. So now, since we're on Kerbal surface, we can EVA, and we're technically in a new biome. So I'm going to take an EVA report, and reset the crew report from there, and then I'm going to actually let go of our craft, and now I can walk him around. So I'm going to walk Jebediah away from the ship, and I'm going to right click on him, and I'm going to press, I guess I can't plant a flag yet. Oh, okay, that's fine. So anyway, so you can have Jebediah get out of his craft. And then he's going to walk over, and I'm going to have him press F to grab onto the ship, and then press B to board. And then I'm going to take a crew report, and then I'm going to, that's going to be all of this run, so I'm going, or this mission, so I'm going to recover the vessel. So now it's going to tell us we've gotten 158 science for a total of 198, and then I'm going to press next, and it's going to tell us we have some more money, and Jebediah did not gain any experience. So that's good. So now we're here, and if I go into research and development, I'm going to unlock stability, I'm going to unlock survivability, I'm going to unlock basic science, I'm going to unlock general construction, and I have 75 more science, so I can unlock flight control or aviation, but I don't really need that, so I'm just going to save my science for now. So that's going to be it for this video, but in the next video we're going to learn how to get to orbit. We're going to learn how to get to orbit and the orbital mechanics and what kind of craft you're going to need. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in that video. Have a nice day.